2023. It seems that by now mankind has explored every part of planet Earth. For hundreds of years, travelers have explored the most inaccessible points on the map. But there is a small island in the Indian Ocean that is shunned out not only by tourists, but even by the military. What is hidden on this small piece of land? Why are scientists, military, and tourists afraid of a small island in the Indian Ocean? Let's talk about this in the video. By the way, if you're not subscribed to Mogol TV, be sure to click on the red subscribe button and the bell next to it. You will always be up to date with new and interesting videos on our channel. 1981. A cargo ship named Primrose ran aground in the Bay of Bengal in the northern Indian Ocean. There was a small island a few hundred meters from where the ship was grounded. The ship couldn't move any further and was permanently stuck on the reef. However, the waves were so strong that the captain decided not to launch the lifeboats to get to the unknown island. That's what saved the sailors' lives. A few days later, one of the sailors reported to the captain that he had noticed a group of people on the island who came out of the jungle. At first, the sailors thought they might be rescuers of their ship, but having looked closely, they saw several dozen half-naked men shooting bows at the ship. Strong waves prevented the natives from reaching the ship, which was a couple of hundred meters from the island, and their arrows were blown away by the wind. Finally, rescuers from India managed to arrive by helicopter and rescue the crew members. Primrose is still almost 40 years later in the same place, a few hundred meters from the island. Thanks to this rescue operation in the early 80s, the mysterious people made the front page of the newspapers. A large number of people in different parts of the world learned about the North Sentinel Island phenomenon. Who are these mysterious hostile people who live on the island? Why do even the Indian military avoid this island, although it officially belongs to India? So, the North Sentinel Island is almost entirely covered by rainforest, except for the coast. The jungle is home to several dozen or hundreds of natives. No one knows the exact number of its inhabitants. Over the past centuries, there have been several unsuccessful attempts to send expeditions to Sentinel Island to study the culture and life of the local people. But all these attempts were not very successful. At best, the expedition members were rescued. At worst, they were killed by the natives, who had been meeting strangers with bows and arrows for several hundred years. The most recent tragic incident occurred a couple of years ago. An American missionary, John Allen Chao, had reached the island illegally despite a current ban by Indian authorities. The young man hoped to make contact with the local population and convert them to Christianity. John was eventually killed by the locals. Researchers don't even know much about the Sentinel Island's population. There is not even accurate information about how many people live on the island. Some evidence suggests that there are 15 to 20 aboriginals living in the jungle today. Other reports put the number closer to 400. North Sentinel Island is part of the Andaman Archipelago in the Bay of Bengal. The Sentinelese are undoubtedly related to the population of the other islands of the archipelago. On other islands, natives have long been in contact with civilization and are well studied by anthropologists. The Sentinelese, on the other hand, have been isolated for so long that even the aboriginals from the nearest island do not understand the Sentinelese language. Scientists managed to establish contact with the inhabitants of the mysterious island only a few times. Thanks to this, we know at least something about the locals. The Sentinelese live in lean-to huts, near which there is always a fire, which is carefully maintained. The natives make canoes to catch fish and collect crabs. Besides, they hunt wild pigs and collect fruit. The main tools are a bow with arrow and knives, which are most likely made of iron that is nailed to the shore by the waves. The Sentinelese learn to use it for their needs. Why are they so hostile to outsiders? According to one version, it is all due to an incident that occurred in 1880. At that time, the island belonged to Great Britain. A group of military and scientists landed on the island. However, the locals managed to notice the approaching guests. As a result, the British found only abandoned houses and a few people, among whom were the elderly and children. The main part of the population hid in the depths of the jungle. The British took the natives they found with them for study. The elderly died quickly because they didn't develop immunity to the diseases of the Europeans. It was decided to bring the children back to the island. It's likely that this incident and several other unfortunate encounters with outsiders were the reason for the Sentinelese combative attitude towards strangers. After India gained independence from Great Britain in the mid-20th century, North Sentinel Island became Indian territory. Anthropologists tried many times to make contact with the locals, leaving various gifts on the shore as well as notes. However, no response was forthcoming, and guests were traditionally greeted with bows and arrows. Only a couple of expeditions managed to get close to the locals and examine them. However, the communication ended by handing over the gifts, though the Sentinelese were evidently more happy to get the copper pots. As of today, Indian authorities forbid any approach to the island or trying to contact the local population. First of all, it is to protect the natives. The obvious thing is that they have not encountered a huge number of diseases and viruses of the civilized world, and therefore did not develop immunity to them. This could eventually lead to the death of the island's entire population. An anthropologist named Pandit, who has studied the people of North Sentinel Island for decades, calls for the local population to be left alone. They have made it clear many times they don't want to communicate with the outside world and cope on their own. Periodically, Indian authorities fly around the island by helicopter to make sure that someone is still living there. There's a good chance we'll never know the real reason why the Sentinelese are so hostile to the outside world. If you found this video interesting, thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell to keep up with new videos, and of course, leave your comments below the video. The famous Statue of Liberty in New York City hides a secret that almost no one knows about. This monument is a famous tourist landmark. Visitors can climb the statue and look at New York City from the observation deck, which is in the crown. However, only a select few know that at the very top, there is a secret room located in the golden torch of the statue. A long time ago, tourists could even go up there, but then access to the room was restricted. For more than 100 years, no one could enter it. In 1916, the structure of the statue's arm was damaged due to a massive explosion that occurred nearby and was set off by German spies. It was then that access to the torch was restricted. After a while, access was going to be resumed, but the torch had fallen into disrepair because of the leak in water. However, if you want to see the view of New York City from the torch of the Statue of Liberty, you can easily use Google to find the image from the webcam that is mounted right on top of the statue. By the way, please thumb up if you would like to visit New York City. Here is the famous Trafalgar Square in London. A secret police station is located there. It is simply impossible to detect it with the naked eye. In the lower left corner, there is a small lantern. However, it is not just a lantern, but a real police station. In fact, it's much roomier than you might think. There is enough space to hold 2 prisoners at once. This construction appeared a little less than 100 years ago, due to the fact that demonstrations were often held on the square. Recently, however, there have been reports that the police station was no longer used for its intended purpose and became just a place to store janitors' tools. The Colosseum is located in Rome. You've all seen it, at least in pictures. But many people did not even guess about the hidden secrets of this construction. In ancient Rome, the Colosseum was used as an arena for various performances, including gladiator fights. Under the Colosseum, there was a whole system of underground rooms and tunnels. They were used to keep predatory animals there, as well as complex mechanisms that were used to make special effects during performances. In addition, some of these underground rooms led to a classified system of tunnels. The good news is that today there are special tours where you can visit these secret rooms. By the way, let's have a little poll in the comments. What city in the world would you like to visit first if you had unlimited money? Write your options in the comments. The Eiffel Tower is perhaps the world's most recognizable landmark. Tens of millions of tourists visit Paris every year to see this particular symbol of the city. Most of them were not even aware of the secret room at the very top of the construction. The well-known tour was built in the late 19th century, designed by engineer Gustave Eiffel. He designed the secret room exclusively for himself. Indeed, during his life, no one except him had access there. Today, those visitors who buy tickets with the opportunity to climb to the top can not only get a spectacular view of the capital of France, but have access to Eiffel's secret room. Disneyland is a famous theme park for children, but there is a place in the park that is only accessible to adults, to rich adults. We are talking about the private Club 33. It appeared in Disneyland, California in the late 1960s. The founder of the park, Walt Disney, came up with the idea of a private club, and according to his plan, men of influence like politicians, businessmen, and others were supposed to meet there. Over the years, mere mortals have been able to become members of Club 33 as well. However, in order to do so, they have to invest quite a lot of money. We are talking about several tens of thousands of dollars. Mount Rushmore is one of the main landmarks of the United States. Absolutely everyone has seen the portraits of the country's 4 presidents carved onto the rocks. But a few people know that there is a secret room behind President Abraham Lincoln's head, which is located on the right. It is virtually impossible to access there, and this has given rise to a large number of theories. However, here is what actually happened. The monument was created almost 100 years ago. Its sculptor had planned for the monument to be much larger. In addition to the head of the presidents, it was supposed to depict important events in American history. This plan was not implemented, so the sculptor was offered to create a special room right inside the mount, a kind of museum of U.S. history. However, the author of the monument did not manage to live up to the end of the work. Although the images of the presidents were completed, the secret room remained unfinished. Since then, almost no one has been able to get there. The Brooklyn Bridge is one of the symbols of New York City, along with the Statue of Liberty. Thousands of people come here every day, but almost no one knows the secret that hides the piers of the bridge. The fact is that the bridge was built back in the 20th century, and a large sum of money for the project was allocated by sellers of alcohol. At that time, refrigerators had not yet been invented, and inside the piers of the bridges, the temperature was ideal for storing alcohol drinks. Plus, there's quite a lot of space inside the piers. Therefore, special cellars for storing alcohol were created there. They were actively used in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Today, these cellars are empty, and it is almost impossible for ordinary people to get there. In most pictures of Venice, you can see St. Mark's Square and the cathedral of the same name. It is a popular landmark visited by huge numbers of tourists. That's why there is usually a long queue at the entrance. All these people only go inside the cathedral, but there is another level beneath the building where the crypt is located. The remains of prominent medical figures of the past are preserved there. Unlike most of the other landmarks in this video, the secret room at St. Mark's Cathedral can be visited. Small tours are given there. The Empire State Building is one more landmark that is visited by everyone who comes to New York City. Most tours take an elevator up to the 86th floor of the building, where there is an observation deck with a beautiful view of the city. However, the impression can be spoiled by the iron bars, which are necessary for security reasons. Not many tourists go up to the 102nd floor. The view of the city is even better there. Plus, you have windows in front of you instead of bars. However, the most breathtaking view await visitors on the 103rd floor, but only the select few can go up there. The secret observation deck has no protective structure other than rather low support. That is, a person can see not only a beautiful view, but also a good dose of adrenaline. In fact, it is unlikely you will be able to visit this place. Only important or famous people have access, who always try to take a picture there. Uffizi Gallery in Florence is one of the most famous museums in the world. It holds works by Leonardo da Vinci, Botticelli, and other great artists. But none of the gallery's visitors have been to the secret tunnel that connects the museum to the Palazzo Pitti, the palace located in the center of the city. The secret corridor was built in the 16th century when the city was governed by the famous Medici. It is interesting that it was decided to remove butcher shops and other places that could be a source of unpleasant smell along the whole length of the tunnel, since important people use that corridor almost every day. Besides, the tunnel was decorated with works of art. However, during World War II, it was destroyed by bombing. After that, there was a long restoration, and the authorities of the city promised to open the secret tunnel for tourists in the coming years. The New York Grand Central Terminal is both an important transportation point and a popular landmark. A huge number of people use the station every day for train trips. Just as many people come here to see it as tourists. Neither of them knows that someone is playing tennis on top of the floor at this moment. Actually, the real tennis court is located there. It was built more than half a century ago. The most interesting thing is that this tennis club is available to everyone. People who are very fond of reading would surely like to have an apartment right in the library building, especially when it comes to famous New York Public Library. It is a huge building with halls full of books. The upper floors of the building were originally designed as apartments where many library workers lived. Some of these apartments still exist today, but no one lives there anymore. These rooms are used for various technical purposes. Australia is a faraway country, but it also has its own sites with hidden secrets. In the center of one of the country's major cities, Melbourne, there's a station called Flinders. Crowds of people use it daily for its intended purpose and have no idea that there's a huge abandoned room on the 3rd floor of the building. Dozens of years ago, events ranging from boxing bouts to beautiful balls were held there. Then, the place fell into disrepair, And although the station itself continued to function, people's access to the third floor of the building was closed. The city's authorities are going to renovate the space in the coming years and open its doors again to the public. The famous Pixar studio also has a secret room, although no one has access to it, neither employees nor visitors. The thing is that once the young Pixar studio was bought by Apple and Steve Jobs had a secret room where he had important meetings, today only a few people can enter that room. Don't forget to thumb up if you found this video interesting. Subscribe to the channel and click on the bell to be informed about new videos. And of course, leave your comments below the video. In this video on Mogol TV channel, you'll find out what happens if you drill through the earth, and 15 more incredible facts that are hard to believe. Number 1. As you know, all kinds of parasites, including worms, can live inside a person. Well, the longest worm found in the human body was 35 meters. Number 2. I'm not urging you to do anything, of course, just for reference. But if you can eat your own hand, you'll get 1,800 calories. That's only half the daily calorie intake of an adult male. But that's okay, because there's a second hand. Number 3. If you can drill a hole all the way through to the center of the earth and then jump in, you will be on the other side of the planet in 42 minutes. Number 4. It's hard to believe, but 2/3 of people on Earth have never seen snow because they live in regions where it is simply impossible to be. Thumbs up if you can see snow right now, just by looking out your window. Number 5. Lobsters are very amazing sea creatures. Frozen lobsters can easily come back to life once defrosted. Number 6. Mosquitoes are known to enjoy drinking our blood. If 1,200,000 mosquitoes do it at the same time, they'll drink all the humans' blood. Number 7. Judging by the fact that you're watching this video right now, you love watching YouTube videos. It would take you about 1,000 years to watch all the videos on this video hosting website. So keep watching. Number 8. Some snakes can fly. Really, it's not a joke. There are at least 5 snake species that can do that. Well, of course it's more accurate to say they glide through the air, but it still looks really creepy. Number 9. A medium-sized cumulus cloud contains 200,000 tons of water. Just to give you an idea of the scale, that's how much the 74 elephants weigh together. Number 10. If you ever played Lego, you notice that the minifigures have a hole in their heads. If you accidentally swallow this piece, the hole will prevent you from suffocating because the air will flow through it. Number 11. Lobsters are immortal creatures. I mean, they never die of old age. They live and grow until some external factor kills them. Number 12. The planet Saturn's density is very low. If you hypothetically imagine it falling into water, the planet wouldn't sink. Of course, that would never happen because Saturn is 9 times the size of the Earth. Number 13. Even if you don't have a runny nose right now, you're still only breathing through one nostril, because our nervous system changes the nostril through which the air comes about once an hour. Number 14. Flamingos can be white or pink. Flamingos turn pink because they eat shrimp, getting their coloring substance. Number 15. Ostriches have such a big eye. I mean, such a small brain. In short, an ostrich's eye is bigger than its brain. Not the smartest bird, in fact. These were 15 facts that are hard to believe. You can find more interesting videos with facts and life hacks on Mogol TV channel. Thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to write comments below the video. When we talk about archaeologists, we often mean people with shovels digging up antiquities. However, mysterious discoveries await scientists not only on land, but also underwater. And sometimes these discoveries are made by ordinary people completely by accident. In this video, I'll tell you about the most amazing findings that archaeologists and ordinary people have discovered at the bottom of the seas and ocean. By the way, if you're not already subscribed to Mogol TV, be sure to click on the red subscribe button and the bell next to it. That way you'll always keep up with the new and interesting videos on our channel. Number 1. The most valuable finding at the bottom of the sea was made quite recently in 2015. A Spanish galleon from the early 18th century was discovered off the coast of Colombia. A galleon was a large warship at the time, but it's not the ship that makes it the most expensive finding in history, but its cargo. The fact is that before it was wrecked, the ship had been carrying a valuable cargo with lots of gold, silver, and precious stones. To date, the value of the cargo is estimated at $17 billion. Thumbs up if you'd be happy to find such a treasure. It turns out that in 1708, A galleon called San Jose was carrying not only a valuable cargo, 60 cannon, but also nearly 600 crew members. Eventually, there was a military collision with another ship off the coast of Colombia. During the battle, the gunpowder in the hold exploded and the ship sank. Out of several hundred crew members, only 11 were rescued. As a result, in 2015, the Colombian military discovered a shipwreck. However, it still lies at the bottom of the sea. While scientists are figuring out how to carefully raise the shipwreck to the surface, politicians are arguing over which country has right to the treasure. Colombia claims the treasure belongs to it because the Colombian military found the ship, while Spain says that since it was their ship in the 18th century, it belongs to them several hundred years later. Number 2. The lost city of Lord Kushner. Just off the coast of India, at the bottom of the ocean, there is the lost city of Lord Kushner, called Dwarka. It's one of the most investigated and documented ancient cities that has been swallowed up by the water element. Archaeologists believe that this city is about 9,000 years old. Before being swallowed up by the water element, it had been the largest port city of the country. Today, at the bottom, several ancient buildings and even streets where people walked many thousands of years ago are still preserved. Number 3. Mysterious bottle of liquid. In 2015, an amateur diver was scuba diving in the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Canada. There he found an old bottle with some murky liquid inside. It seems to be nothing surprising, just dirty water in the bottle. However, it was sealed tightly, which means nothing could get into it from the outside. The bottle looked quite old. The diver managed to read the inscription on the cork. There was a signature in English, Keith's Brewery. It turned out that such an enterprise really existed in that area of Canada in the 19th century. The bottle was eventually given to scientists for analysis. It turned out that inside there was beer brewed in the 19th century. Moreover, after careful analysis, which determined that the contents were not dangerous to human health, the researchers ventured to try the product. They appreciated that the drink was still similar to beer, but in addition to the fruity notes, there was a distinct taste of rotten eggs. Actually, the bottle spent a century at the bottom of the ocean. Number 4. Atlit Yam. Off the coast of India in the Mediterranean Sea, an ancient settlement was discovered dating back to the Neolithic period, about 8,000 years BC. What happened in that settlement remains a mystery to this day. Apparently, the lives of the people of Atlit Yam was cut short in an instant. Back in the 1980s, scientists accidentally discovered the remains of houses, wells, and several dozen human skeletons at the bottom of the sea. This place is considered one of the most detailed preserved prehistoric settlements. According to the findings, the locals were engaged in cattle breeding and fishing. The main attraction of Atlit Yam was a huge stone structure weighing 7 tons. Almost 30 years later, archaeologists continue to explore the mysterious place, but nowadays it is carried out with the use of modern submersibles. Scientists believe that the settlement was flooded after the Ice Age, but most likely by this time, life in Atlit Yam had already come to an end. The probable cause was a sudden tsunami. Number 5. Antikythera. In the 1st century BC, an ancient Roman ship sank off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera. Just over 100 years ago, a diver discovered the shipwreck by pure chance. Finally, it became one of the most important discoveries in the history of underwater archaeology. The scientists arrived and discovered bronze and marble statues at the bottom, as well as a mysterious Antikythera mechanism. In fact, it was an ancient computer. It consisted of several dozens of bronze gears and several dials. According to experts, it was used to calculate the movement of celestial bodies and predict astronomical phenomena. Number 6. Uluburun Shipwreck. This shipwreck was accidentally discovered by divers at the bottom of the sea near Antalya, Turkey, in 1982. At the time, the discovery truly shocked scientists. It took them more than 10 years to carefully raise all the remains of the ship to the surface. Only after that, the scientists were able to conduct a full analysis of the ship. Then they found out that it was a Phoenician ship, which was supposedly had sunk around 1400 BC. But most importantly, everything inside the ship had been well preserved, beginning from the furniture to the different cargoes carried by the ship, ancient gold jewelry, copper bars, weapons, and much more. Thanks to this, scientists have been able to judge the true extent of international trade in 1400 BC, all thanks to a few random divers who just decided to go for a swim. By the way, write in the comments, what would you do if you found gold at the bottom of the sea? Would you keep it? Would you want to give it to scientists? Please write honestly, otherwise it will not be interesting. Number 7. Ice Finger of Death. Sometime, while exploring the bottom of the sea and ocean, it is possible to discover not only wrecks and mysterious objects, but also unexplainable natural phenomenon. One of them is the ice finger or depth. The scientific name for this phenomenon is brinzel. It forms under the ice of the ocean. It looks as if an ice needle begins to grow under the ice at the surface and reaches the very bottom, freezing out all the organisms, which at this point are crawling on the bottom of the ocean, suspecting nothing. It looks truly epic. Scientists have known about this phenomenon for about 50 years, but only recently, thanks to modern technology, they were able to film it. As they say, if it wasn't filmed, no one would have believed it was possible. Number 8. Heraklion. In the early 1930s, a pilot flying near the mouth of the Nile River noticed from the air that there was something similar to ruins in the water. It took 70 years to thoroughly investigate that place. It turns out to be the ancient town of Heraklion. Scientists found out that several hundred years BC, it was a developed ancient Egyptian port city. However, the city fell into decline due to competition with other cities. Around the 8th century, an earthquake and the resulting tsunami caused the town to disappear underwater. Archaeologists had many discoveries to make. For example, they found 64 ships in the submerged port. This is the largest cemetery of ancient ships in the history of archaeology. In addition, huge stelae and a statue of the pharaoh was raised from the bottom. Number 9. Ancient Roman medicines. Not so often, archaeologists manage to find ancient shipwrecks. However, sometimes the main finding is not the ship itself, but the things inside it. This is what happened to an ancient Roman ship found at the bottom of the sea off the Italian coast in the late 1980s. Scientists couldn't believe it when they realized what they found on that ship. It wasn't jewelry or the remains of ancient utensils. Archaeologists found well-preserved ancient Roman tablets. Yes, at that time, people also needed to be treated, although medicine was not as advanced as it is today. After the study, scientists concluded that the found drugs were used by the Romans for treatment of eyes. Number 10. Despite all the amazing findings, the main mystery of the world ocean is still the Mariana Trench. It is considered to be the deepest place in the world ocean. Just imagine, it's 11 kilometers deep. It's located in the Pacific Ocean, near the Philippines. To understand how deep this place is, just imagine that the highest mountain on the planet, Everest, was placed at the bottom of the ocean. It won't even reach 2 kilometers to the water surface. What amazing creatures live at this depth? Those who believe in the existence of ancient monster, Megalodon, are sure that if it exists, it is probably hiding somewhere at the depth of the Mariana Trench. Although most scientists would disagree with such a hypothesis, the incredible depth of this place continues to generate many mysteries and riddles, the answers to which have not yet been found. Every year, there are several dives of researchers, and they discover more and more details about this amazing place. Don't forget to like this video if you found this video interesting, subscribe to this channel, and click on the bell to keep up with new videos. And of course, leave your comments below the video. Every day we use things without even knowing what they're really for. 12 everyday things you don't know what their purpose is. In this video on Mogol TV, number 1. If you're watching this video on your computer or laptop right now, take a look at the keyboard. The English F and J keys have little bumps. They were made for people who type a lot. If you take your fingers off the keyboard, for example, to take a break, you will then return your hands and find the keys you want without even looking at the keyboard and continue typing immediately. Number 2. You probably noticed that there's a transparent lining inside a soda lid. What's it for, you ask? Because the bottle closes perfectly without it. The fact is that without this little detail, gases in the lemonade or mineral water would evaporate. That's why you see these things on bottles of soda water, but you don't find them on bottles of ordinary water. Number 3. Both the new iPhone 7 and old Apple phones have a small hole between the camera and the flash. Many people think the camera uses it to focus. Most people don't even notice the hole. But in fact, it's a microphone that records sound when you take video with your external camera. Number 4. If you've ever used a tape measure, you've noticed a few interesting details. For example, there's a little hole in the end. This is so you can get a firm grip on a screw or nail and measure the desired distance. The prongs at the very end are needed so you can mark where you started to measure from without having to use any additional tools. Number 5. Many sneakers have a pair of holes on the inside of the sole in addition to holes for the laces. These holes have two functions. Firstly, it's for ventilation, and secondly, it's for laces. Sneakers were originally designed as basketball shoes. By lacing through these holes, the shoes fit tight on the feet. Number 6. Everyone already knows why we need a little pocket on our jeans. but why it needs rivets rather than regular stitches is not very clear. It's all about the fact that in the 19th century, jeans were worn by laborers and miners. The regular stitches were just coming apart. That's why Levi Strauss, founder of the famous Levi brands, invented those rivets. Number 7. If you've flown on an airplane at least once, you've noticed there's a little hole in the underside of the external porthole. As it turns out, this detail is very important. There could have been a major disaster without it. The fact is, there are different temperatures on the Earth and in the air. For example, it's 25 degrees Celsius on the Earth and 35 degrees Celsius at 10,000 meters. This causes the air between the panes to compress and decompress, so the panes will crack without this hole. Number 8. I'm sure all the boys and many girls don't know why one side of a hairpin is fluid. This side of the hairpin is supposed to face the skin of the head. These grooves help hold the hairpin better. Number 9. Surprisingly, many drivers don't know what this arrow on the fuel gauge is for. The fact is that different cars have the fuel tank on different sides. When you drive up to the petrol station, you can see which side the tank is on without getting out of the car. It's very handy if you have a rental car or a stolen car. Number 10. A hole in the handle of a frying pan or saucepan is not only for hanging it on a nail, but also for conveniently positioning a stirring spoon. It was a life hack for you. Number 11. You might be surprised to learn that the hole in the cap of a burrito can save your life. If you accidentally swallow the cap, you will only be able to breathe thanks to this hole. Number 12. Usually, to get the Tic Tac out of the pack, you just pour it into your hands or mouth. This can be 2, 4, or 7 candies. There's a little cavity in the lid, so you can take one candy at a time. Those were 12 common things you don't know what their purpose is. More interesting videos with facts and life hacks you'll find on the Mogol TV channel. Thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to leave comments. Many people believe that in the Middle Ages, people mostly lived to the age of 30 to 35 and were of lower stature than we are today. Both of these statements are misconceptions, but first things first. First, in the Middle Ages, no one considered a person at 35 to be elderly. The myth that people died before 40 was born because of the low average life expectancy at the time. The reasons for this are fairly obvious: high mortality rates in childhood due to underdeveloped medicine, as well as epidemics and wars. So, if you add up the age of all the people and divide by their number, you get about 35 years. However, if a person managed to survive all these hardships, he easily lived up to 70 to 80 years old. The misconception of low stature was born from the fact that many medieval buildings had very low doorways. However, in fact, from the 10th to the 19th century, people's height did not change much. It's believed that the average height of a woman in the Middle Ages was 158 centimeters, and the height of men about 170 centimeters. By the way, write in the comments what your height is. Let's see how tall our viewers at Mogol TV are. In the Middle Ages, no one washed, and the streets were dirty and smelled bad. This is another common myth about the Middle Ages that has largely become popular because of movies. In movies where the events take place in the Middle Ages, you often see dirty people walking through dirty streets full of filth. However, things were different. The statement that people in the Middle Ages did not wash for years and smelled disgusting is far from the truth. In those days, people's sense of smell worked about as well as yours or mine, and no one liked the smell of a man who hadn't washed in a long time. Yes, of course, no one took a bath in a jacuzzi, and there was no modern plumbing in the cities, but people used the available means. The well-off, which were a minority, could afford to have a bathtub at home, which rather resembled a large wooden barrel. For most people in large cities, there were public baths. By the way, it was in the Middle Ages that soap and other hygiene items became widespread. In addition, such a household thing as laundry was the norm for the Middle Ages. People washed clothes, linens, and so on. The profession of laundress already existed at that time. As for the cleanliness of the streets, there were indeed problems. They often smelled and were quite dirty. However, scientists and rulers of the time tried to solve this problem, especially during the late Middle Ages. There were strict rules against throwing sewage out into the streets, as well as against letting pets roam freely in the city. Medieval Vikings and other warriors wore helmets with horns. This is a myth that is easy to believe because Vikings are always depicted with horn helmets. This is their distinct feature. However, the warriors did not wear such headgear simply because it would have been uncomfortable in battle. People in the Middle Ages were not foolish enough to risk their lives over an ornament. It was not until the 19th century that Vikings were actively depicted with horns. These images were picked up by the film industry, and the misconception became very popular. There is often a misconception that in the Middle Ages in Europe, people considered tomatoes to be poisonous. Firstly, this is not true. Secondly, tomatoes were brought to Europe from South America only in the 16th century, and by that time, the Renaissance had already begun. Another common myth about food in the Middle Ages was lack of utensils. Allegedly, people all ate with their hands and did not use special utensils. It is clear that at times, utensils were not as diverse as they are today. However, in the Middle Ages, people actively used knives and forks. It will come as a surprise to many of you to learn that forks have been in use since the 6th and 7th century. By the way, the statement that most people in the Middle Ages were very stupid and believed that the earth was flat is also a myth. Many people used to believe that the understanding of a round earth only originated thanks to Christopher Columbus and his voyage in the 15th century. Allegedly before that, people believed that the earth was flat. This drawing, made decades before Columbus's voyage, vividly demonstrates that people perceived the planet as a spherical object. Here you can see not only the round earth, but even the atmosphere and the sun. The spherical shape of the earth was known in the Middle Ages not only to scientists, but also to many ordinary people. Moreover, this conclusion was reached long before the Middle Ages. In ancient Greece, it was calculated by means of geometry. In addition, ordinary people in the Middle Ages had a pretty good knowledge of the world outside their homes. Trade between cities and countries was already quite developed, so those who had been to different parts of the world could tell a lot about other territories. There is a myth that women in the Middle Ages were absolutely powerless. This is not true. To date, historians have been able to find much evidence that in the Middle Ages, women could inherit property, engage in trade or other businesses, and sell and buy real estate. In the Middle Ages, sophisticated instruments of torture were widely used, and in general, everything was very brutal. One part of this myth is true, and the other is not so much. The numerous instruments of torture that are often attributed to the Middle Ages were actually invented several centuries later, so it is a myth. However, compared to modern times, the Middle Ages were a rather violent time. Violence and corporal punishment were widespread. Many people perceived it as a natural way of imposing order. However, the executions primarily evoked horror rather than being a kind of show that people gathered to for entertainment. The iron chastity belt is commonly associated with the Middle Ages. It is alleged that Austrian husbands, going on distant military campaigns, forced their wives to wear such metallic constructions. However, as you have already realized, this is a common misconception. Moreover, historians are sure that chastity belts were not used at all in the Middle Ages. They became popular only in the 19th century, when there was a surge of interest in the Middle Ages. Many famous castles in Europe are commonly attributed to the Middle Ages period. For example, the famous German Neuschwanstein Castle. It is, by the way, one of the prototypes of the famous palace with the Disney screensaver. However, despite the fact that it may look like a medieval castle, Neuschwanstein was built much later, namely in the 19th century. In fact, it is a far cry from what fortress castles were in the Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, people drank only beer and wine, and if they drank water, they still added wine to it to disinfect it, because there was simply no pure water in the Middle Ages. This myth can be heard quite often. The fact that people in the Middle Ages drank more than just alcohol is obvious. Simply because our body doesn't work that way, it needs water. Human anatomy was the same in this respect in the Middle Ages than it is today. Medieval cities had places where residents could take pure drinking water. People understood the importance of drinking pure water, and medieval scientists also talked about this. Another similar myth concerns the use by medieval people of large quantities of spices to hide the smell of rotten food and to make it safe for consumption. It is not entirely clear where this misconception came from. First, most people in the Middle Ages could not afford to buy spices. They were very rare and expensive because they were brought to Europe from afar. Second, as we have already found out, people were not stupid and understood that if you ate rotten food, you would most likely get poisoned. On the subject of stupidity, even peasants in the Middle Ages were not as stupid as is commonly believed. Of course, most of them were not quite intelligent, simply because they could not get any education. But nevertheless, the peasants were very well versed in agriculture and could interact with authorities, such as going to court and resolving some disputes there. So we should not think of medieval peasants as foolish simpletons who knew nothing about life. Because of the myth of immense cruelty in the Middle Ages, there's an opinion that people at that time were serious, angry, and had absolutely no sense of humor. This is not true. There are many letters from that time where people made jokes, and there were writers who made up funny stories and histories. Of course, most of these jokes won't be funny to us simply because a long time has passed. Unfortunately, humor gets obsolete fast. 100 years from now, people aren't likely to be laughing at things we're bellyaching about today. Because living conditions in the Middle Ages were rather difficult, the myth was born that children back then were not given much attention. Moreover, children had almost no childhood, and they immediately became adults. However, this is not entirely true. Of course, in those days, attitudes towards childhood were quite different than they are today. But nevertheless, everyone understood that children are not like adults, and they should be treated very differently. Moreover, historians managed to discover toys of the time, such as small horses or dolls. Don't forget to thumbs up if you liked this video, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell to always be aware of new videos, and of course, leave the comments below the video.